Hello, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. My name is Marc Sabatella, and I'm just here to show you some things that you can be doing with MuseScore. And the topic that I've chosen to talk about today is prettying up your parts, cleaning up your parts for printing so that they're more readable, and the score as well. As always, if you're watching and participating in the chat, feel free to ask questions. I'll prioritize questions that are about what I'm talking about, but I'm more than happy to answer unrelated questions because that's how things work. So what I'm going to do is, last week I was looking at a score that I used as an example in setting up some customizations, and it was all about the style settings and getting some overall positions of things looking good. And you can do a lot that way. And I definitely recommend that you do as much as you can with style settings. And we'll do a little bit of that today. But I want to talk about then, well, when you do need to adjust more things manually, how to go about doing that and just making strategies for doing this. So this is the score that I had been using. It's a piece of mine for string quartet plus piano. And one of the things I want to do, first of all, is just point out that when I'm looking at this kind of stuff, the overall appearance of the score, then I want to get a clean view of things. So first thing I want to do is just sort of temporarily close the palettes window and the inspector. And the keyboard shortcuts for that, the palettes are F9 and the inspector is F8. You can also just click the little X's that were there. And this then lets me see more of the score at once. Another thing that I would often do is, over here, change the zoom to be the width of the page. So now it fits on screen. And if I do need to show the inspector again, notice it automatically shrinks again to keep the page width. That's a really useful thing, because I will occasionally be using the inspector during this process. One of the other things that I like to do is take advantage of the page up and page down keys to move a page at a time. Now, my keyboard does not physically have a page up or page down key, but on my keyboard, it's the FN plus up and down arrows that act as page up and page down. I think a lot of keyboards probably have a similar shortcut. I know on some Chromebooks I've used, there's like this search button, and that plus the up and down arrows works to do page up and page down. Not that you can run MuseScore easily on a Chromebook. But so by doing that, FN page down, I'm able to move a page at a time, which is really kind of nice. So I'm going to be using that kind of thing a lot, and plus just scrolling. And for what I'm doing right now, the default is for things to scroll horizontally like this. Each of the pages are left to right. But since I have everything set up where I have 2 systems per page, I might be better off scrolling vertically. So I'm going to go to Edit Preferences, and it's under Canvas to scroll vertically. It's just a little setup I like to do to make things a little nicer. There we go. So that I can just scroll in one direction and see things. All right. So as far as setup sorts of things, that's what I want to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sort of start scanning and looking for issues that are concerning to me. Now, I'm right now not trying to publish this score. I might eventually, but I want it to just look okay. It's the parts I'm going to be a little more concerned about, because people have to read the parts. The score is more for my own benefit, the conductor's benefit, but realistically, I've conducted from a lot of scores that are pretty messy in a lot of these sort of details, but the parts need to be cleaner. So like one of the things that I'm seeing here is I see a little bit of text that's colliding with the chord symbol, and I think that's because of the style setting that I have going. This is staff text, and that's chord symbol, and the style for staff text interferes with the position for chord symbols. Now, realistically, this is going to happen all over the piano part because I've got chord symbols all over the piano part, but I don't tend to have chord symbols anywhere else. So what I think I'm kind of inclined to do, I could just move this bit of text individually, and I click it, and the way I like to move things individually is with Control and the arrow keys. That moves things by a staff space at a time. So Control down arrow, Control down arrow. Just arrow by itself moves it 1/10 of a staff space. So it's slowly moving things. And I could do that, but I'm going to hit Control R, which puts it back to the default position. I'm thinking ahead and imagining that a lot of my staff text is going to have this issue, but realistically, only on the piano part. What I could do is just change the position of all the staff text on the piano part. Now, I don't know that this is really going to make sense, but it occurs to me and I want to try it. So I'm going to need the inspector to help me. So I'm going to press F8 to bring it back. I'm going to right-click that staff text, and I can then say Select All Similar Elements in Same Staff. And now all the staff texts on the piano staff are now selected. And I can use the vertical offset here in the inspector. And I'm going to also use the arrow shortcuts. Now, it's a little counterintuitive. I'm going to need to hit the up arrow to move it down. And that's because the up arrow is increasing the vertical offset. And vertical offset, positive numbers go down. So just take my word for it, that's how it works. When I click in this area here and press the up arrow, you will see the staff text move down. And it moves down a 1/2 a staff space at a time, which is kind of nice because I think 1.5 staff spaces kind of nails this. So since I had all the staff text on the piano staff selected, they all just move down. You can only see that one, but here's another one over there that did. You can see it moved also. There's another one there. There's another one there. So I kind of like how that worked. That did good things for me. So I'm gonna kind of keep that as a starting place. Now again, I'm just gonna kind of scan around. I'm now seeing when I did this last time, I had the dynamics and the chord symbols, and I added some extra space so that these wouldn't collide, but they kind of do. And I could worry about that, or I could say, you know what, that's good enough. If I want to add a little more space here, I'm going to go back to staff properties and try, like, well, what if I did 3.5 spaces? My guess is it's not going to fit on the, if I try this, it probably won't fit 2 systems anymore. Oh, it does. Okay, well, then I'm just going to leave it that. Great, that opened up just a little more space for me. So that's looking good. Scanning around, things are looking basically good. There's a couple places where some long chord symbols are kind of colliding. MuseScore does some automatic things to avoid collision of chord symbols, but it works within a measure better than it works across measures. So I could try to open up a little more space there, but I would just as soon not. It's not going to be crucial for the score to have that kind of space there. In the part, I'm going to want that more readable. So again, I kind of keep scrolling through and looking just to see if I see any issues. And one of the reasons why it's looking as clean as it did is I really had put some thought into the style settings that I used. If you use good style settings, then there's fewer collisions. All right, now I'm finally getting some collisions here. And so I customize things like the height of my chord symbols and the position of dynamics as necessary. I don't think I had to touch the dynamic position on this one, but I have on other scores. All right, so here I've got some bow markings that are colliding with dynamics. And again, this is only going to be an issue in the score. I mean, think about it. This forte is in the violin 1 staff, but this bow marking is in the violin 2 staff. So in the parts, that's not going to be an issue. I have to decide if I really care about that in the score. But I'm going to, anyhow, I'm just going to select that forte and just Control arrow, move it up. There, it's out of the way. Actually, now I look at this other one, though, and I see there's not going to be room to move it up. So I'm going to set that back where it was, Control R, and this time I'm going to move it to the left. Control left. I'm going to do the same thing over here, Control left, and same thing over here, Control left. Now, one thing that's occasionally good and occasionally not good is these adjustments that I'm making are only in the score. When I generate the parts, these adjustments, these manual adjustments, the style settings are going to carry through to the parts, but the manual adjustments I make are not. In this case, that's a good thing because these collisions won't exist in the parts. Some of the other manual adjustments I make, maybe I would wish that they were carried through into the parts, and that's well, you can't have it both ways, unfortunately. So that's all looking pretty good. This is all looking pretty good. Here again, I've got okay. So this is one where this dynamic is colliding with a note, and that's going to be an issue in the part as well. And this is one where if I make this adjustment, I'm going to wish that it was in the part, and it won't be, but I'll just have to make it separately. And so I'm going to click that and Control left. I think I'll do a couple notches. There we go. This one, you notice this is not going to be an issue in the part because this is on the violin 2 staff, but it's colliding with things in the viola staff. So there's a question about piano slashes, and I'm going to show that in just a second. I'm going to make this adjustment here. I think I'm just going to move these guys up because that's going to make more sense. Maybe up one and left one. Up one, left one. Okay, so the question was about the slashes for the piano. This is really simple. If you want to fill a region with slashes, you select the region. So I did a click here, a shift click here, and then Edit, Tools, Fill with Slashes. Boom. So now there's slashes there. And that just fills a region with slashes. There's another type of slash notation you'll see where it's not just slashes one per beat, but it's actually reflecting a rhythm. Like I can show you that right here. If I wanted to just show that you're supposed to play, I'm looking for a place where it would make musical sense because I would like it to make musical sense, but I won't worry about that right now. I can select this measure and say Edit, Tools, Toggle Rhythmic Slash Notation. And now you see you get this rhythm that is the original rhythm, but the notes have been replaced with slashes. And sometimes that's something that you might want. So I'll undo that change because I don't want it. All right, so again, I'm looking for things that look a little off. And basically, I had done a tiny bit of cleanup to this score when I first wrote it. This is 2014, but only a tiny bit because I knew I wasn't going to be playing from the score. I was going to be playing from my part, and the other players were going to be playing from their parts. And yet the defaults work pretty well. I should mention that MuseScore 3, which is not like imminent. I mean, there's no official word on when it might be, but maybe in a year. That's just a wild guess. We'll be looking at a MuseScore 3 release. You can already go download nightly builds. It's very experimental. Things crash. A lot of things don't work right, but you can experiment with it by going to musescore.org, going to the download menu, and then finding nightly builds. And if you download a nightly build of what's called the master, that's eventually what's going to become MuseScore 3. And it's going to automatically do a lot of these collision avoidances. Like right here, this note that's colliding with the dynamic, MuseScore 3 would automatically fix that. So I wouldn't have to be doing all these adjustments. Which will be really nice. Sometimes, though, I know from experience with like Sabatella, which does a lot of that sort of thing, sometimes it resolves the collision, but I don't like how it resolves the collision, and you might have to override it yourself anyhow. So it's not going to be a magic bullet, but it'll be helpful. All right, so and that's basically the end of the piece. So I've scrolled all the way through the piece, and that's about all I saw in the score. This was a score that didn't have a whole lot of collisions. Now, when I generate the parts, I'm going to go ahead and save what I just did to the score. I'm going to generate the parts now. File, Parts. Whoa, excuse me a second. I need to stand up. I'm in a room. Oh, there we go. I'm in a room where the lights are on a timer, and if you don't move for apparently 15 minutes, I don't even know, the lights go out. It's interesting. I've taught in rooms like that before. So I went to File Parts, I hit the New All button, and now I have all my parts. Now, when I do this, here are my parts on these tabs. If I look at them, they're going to need some cleanup as well. So the first thing I notice is, boy, that's a lot of wasted space there. Well, that's because my score had all this extra space there that I had added thinking, oh, I'm being all nice and clever, kind of adding some space here so that the first system on the first page would be a little more centered. Well, that was all well and good for the score. It doesn't look so good for the parts. So what I'm going to do is reset that in the part. And now that's actually probably too little space. So what did I saw it was 15 before, that's 0. I'm going to just try 5. Yeah, that's a good guess. All right. And I like using the numbers for that because then I can do the same thing in the other parts and know that it's going to be consistent. I'm one of those people who they talk about a foolish consistency. Well, I like foolish consistency. So I'm just going to each part and making this same adjustment. Now, most of the adjustments that I'm going to do, I'm not going to have to go through one part at a time like this. Style settings, I'll show you how you can make them all at once. Manual adjustments will be different everywhere. So I have this set. I could go to page width, but unfortunately, well, page width is going to be fine. What did I do? Oh, I switched to the piano part, sorry. Page width. All right. So as I scroll through here, I'm going to be looking for things that need fixing. Now, the one thing that I know typically needs fixing, but is not, I wasn't thinking, but it doesn't tend to need it. It's not an issue so much on my string parts are slurs. I don't tend to write in slurs for string players. I know that string players are better at working out this sort of stuff, bowing, than I am. I'm not a string player. So I don't tend to enter a lot of slurs there. I do in my wind part, because I do have enough insight into wind playing from my clarinet playing days that I do write in a lot of slurs there, and they typically need a fair amount of adjustment. So for instance, if there had been a slur here, so if I had added a slur there, I look at this, the slurs across lines are one of the ones that work the least well, I think. So this isn't very pleasing to me. I would probably adjust that to look more like this, and adjust it at this end to look more like that. And that I just had to do by double clicking and dragging the handles. I don't know. I sometimes get worried about things like that, and sometimes I just think, it's going to be okay. It's when things are actually colliding with other things. Like if I had tried to slur between here and here, I have a feeling, yeah, it's like this slur here would collide with some notes. So one of the things that I can do is first just press X, which flips it from top to bottom and vice versa, to see if that actually makes it look better. Here it's not, but it does help a bit. And actually slurs above the staff. In this is a case where the stems are mixed direction. Some stems are up, some are down. Having a slur above is not a bad idea anyhow. And so I'm not too far off here. So if I double click that again, I could just drag this handle up a bit, that handle over here, and I could just try to do things like that. I can also just click the thing and use the arrow keys. Can I use the arrows? Because I can't. I can use, though, the inspector to just move the whole thing up a little bit. So, I will I will adjust Slurs thumb, and unfortunately that's one of the more time-consuming things in my win parts is fixing up slurs like that. And again, MuseScore 3 is going to be much better for that. And here's another thing where it's not going to be the same between score and parts, nor would you want it to. Because, like, think about it. This measure here, these two measures, the first three measures of A, are all on the same system. And they take up about that much space. But if I look at the score, the first three measures of A, they're not even on the same system, right? Here's the first measure, there's the next two. So any adjustment that I make to the slur in the score, it's not going to make sense in the parts because the layout is so totally different. So often it's a good thing that the adjustments don't get copied. As I said, sometimes you do wish it did. So I keep looking. Now, one of the things I notice is that, boy, this is looking overall just a little crowded. I look at this and say, well, how many pages is this taking? It's 2 pages, and it looks like there's a fair amount of extra room on this page. When I say that because it looks like, see how close together the staves are here and how much further apart they are here? That's because I think it was able to I think there's probably room for another system here is what I'm saying, or at least to have more measures. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a overall change to the spacing in my parts, and that is going to be a style setting. And I'm going to go to Style, General, Measure, Spacing. Now, this is the same thing that if you've used stretch before, it's under the layout menu, increase stretch, decrease stretch. Stretch increases the spacing for a selection, like an individual measure or a few measures at a time. But if I think, I think overall it just looks a little crowded, I can increase the spacing, and this basically is what stretch gets applied to. So I might just increase it to 1.3. and see if that spaces things out a little more. Yeah, I think overall I just like that better. Well, I'm just going to apply it to all parts. There we go. So now all my parts just got that same spacing. I'm not going to bother doing it to my score because for the score, first of all, it wasn't so much an issue in the score. The score is a little more spread out anyhow, just by the nature of the fact that there's multiple staves and the way the layout works is things will always take up more space in the score because there has to be enough room for each of the staves. And it's a smaller size. The page is landscape mode versus portrait mode in the way I had it set up. Anyhow, I'm going to leave the score alone. I didn't notice it looking crowded, and I would rather have the score as few pages as possible. I'd like the parts as few pages as possible too, but now I'm going to use stretch if necessary. Like if this causes something to move on to 3 pages, I will adjust. But as it was, it didn't. But I think you can see it did add another system. I'm pretty sure it did because it looks like maybe the systems are closer together now. I suppose I could have counted systems, but I'm just going to hit undo for a second. If I hit undo, that was the undo of the apply to all parts. Let me undo again for this page, for this part. Yeah, I'm not sure if I actually just undid it or not. It's undoing the slur. I think maybe that style setting didn't undo. I don't know if that's intended. Anyhow, let me go back there and make sure that I've got my 1.3. All right, oops, that was totally the wrong setting, so I'm just going to hit cancel. But I did notice it was the right setting, and I can see from here, layout, style, general, measure, spacing, 1.3. In fact, I'm just going to go a little more and see how that suits me. Does it fit on 2 pages still? Not quite. Oh, but so close. In fact, I could just select these measures and use the decrease stretch command, which is curly brace. So I can just press curly brace right now and just squeeze those last few measures onto one system and not change anything else and be perfectly happy. So that is looking good. If I look around some more now, I'm looking at where my collisions are. One of the things that I had set up, either I think in the template that I use or in the score, I had set up my rehearsal letters, the position of them. I might have customized that already. I don't remember. In fact, what I could do is just go to a new score and see, because I can't remember. Control M, G. Well, it's centered over the bar line, centered over, that looks pretty much the same. So maybe that is the default. And then at the beginning of a system, is that the same? There's different settings that you can have. So it's right after the time signature, that's the default. Yeah, and this is all good. In scores where a lot of my lead sheet type scores, I don't use measure numbers, but I will have rehearsal letters, and I want them all the way flush left because I try to lay things out that way. And so I can do that by setting the text style. And actually, I think I set it so that if it's left aligned, let's see. Now, actually, it's set so that if it's right aligned, it will go this way. And the reason is that way, I do this in lead sheets a lot because by having rehearsal marks right aligned, they'll avoid chord symbols. So in lead sheets, I very often want my rehearsal marks to be right aligned so they avoid chord symbols. And then it'll also do that here, but it'll push it all the way to the beginning of the system where possible. I don't really want that, but I guess I wanted to show that because when I do lead sheets, that's a common thing. And so the lead sheet template, I think, is set up that way. Already, but if you're creating your own, that's something you can do. All right, so again, as I look at this, it's looking pretty good. I'm not seeing a whole lot of adjustments I need to make. Now this tie is a little bit obscured here, so I think I'm just going to take this rehearsal mark and just move it up. Well, I just pressed up arrow. I'm going to hit down, but control up, move it a whole space. Just because, I don't know, I'm just like I like consistency, I like round numbers. I mentioned that last week. So this is all looking surprisingly good. They don't all look this good right out of the box. Let's go to the violin 2 part. Okay, so here's a dynamic marking that's colliding with the chord symbol. So here I'm just gonna, since I've got room, I'll go control up arrow, and that fixed it. And here again is an example where it's just as well that it didn't do the same adjustment in the score because that rehearsal letter won't be there. You know, this is right on, let's see, that's the very first marking at letter A in the violin 2 part. You see it's not colliding with anything here, so there would have been no reason for the same adjustment to apply. That's something that comes up commonly in the forums, which is why I'm making a point here of showing why the default's not a bad thing. All right, so move this one down a bit and over. Now this one probably was that way in the score, and if I look at letter C in the score for violin 2, or did I already fix it? Is that one of the ones I already fixed? I don't remember. Nope, there it is. So if I really wanted, I could make the same adjustment there. Probably eventually we would like to have a more automatic facility to say, well, this adjustment I do, even though by default you wouldn't apply it in both places. There should be a way to force MuseScore to do it in both places. I would like to see that, and vice versa. If there's an adjustment that it wants to do in both places, to override it. All right, so here's another one. The piano, control up, and control left. That's actually, I'm going to go back down. All right, so here's a case where my nice round numbers are failing me, so I'm just going to go with the up arrow. And what I could do is move the rehearsal mark, of course, instead of moving the dynamic mark. But you do whatever you want. Move this guy up. And this accent mark is crashing into that slur a little bit. So move it up. That's too much. So again, round numbers are failing me. But I still like round enough that I might click this guy and just go one notch there, which moves it half a space, which is also a nice round number that I like. So keep looking, keep looking. Yeah, things look pretty good. Probably a lot of people's scores don't look as good as this one does right out of the bat, and it's because I am so careful with style settings. And I also am careful to use style settings rather than manual adjustments to as great an extent as possible. I wait and do the manual adjustments at the very end in situations like this. So, and I'm just going down a line at a time and looking for things, and boy, there wasn't a whole lot to do there either. Slurs, as I mentioned, that's going to be the most time consuming, but double click, drag some handles. It's not rocket science, it's just a little bit time consuming. Okay, that's good enough. That's a little, actually, just looks a little too much like it's applying to that rehearsal letter. This one is just barely clearing, but since I made that same adjustment on the other one, I think I'm going to make it here. So again, I'm clicking in the vertical offset, hitting the down arrow to decrease the vertical offset, which actually pushes the symbol up. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now, one of the things I didn't do that I should do is also pay attention, to where the page turn is. This is something that like real music engravers pay a lot of attention to, is where page turns happen. I got really lucky on the first one. Look at where the page turn happened. It happened going into a multi-measure rest. So you play this, and then you have all the time in the world to turn a page. Awesome. Perfect. I'm not going to mess with that guy. The violin 2 part. Here, I look at this and, well, there's not a whole lot I can do. There's not any great opportunities, but, okay, here's this kind of repeated passage, and then the note changes. I could say, well, gee, maybe it would be better if the page turn happened right here, or right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to make the page turn happen right here. I don't know that it's really necessary, but at least I get to show you what that would look like. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a page break right there, Control Enter. Now, when I do that, now there's really too few measures on this line. I'm going to have to do some fiddling of things. So I might hit a line break there to move this measure down, and then think about, just if I want to make other adjustments. Do I want to move this measure down or not? I'm not going to get too crazy with that, though. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. But this page break didn't really accomplish much except me showing you how to do it and why it might be important. You should just think about where the page turn is going to happen to be. Now, if I was a violin player, I might also think, is this C a note that I don't need one? Can I play that with my finger off the fretboard? Oh. And the answer is no, right? This is a violin, so G is the low string, and then D. Yeah, am I getting my violin fingering right? I believe I am. So this, I need to have my finger on the fretboard to do this, but it's going to be the case with the D flat anyhow. So same difference. It's not going to be a big issue with the page turn because these pages can lie side by side anyhow. It's a bigger issue when you're going from page 2 to page 3. But anyhow, again, I got to kind of show you what's going on. All right, happy. So the viola part, I don't remember if I even started looking at this. I think not. But I had finished the violin 2 part, right? I got to the end of that. And I think before the repeats weren't on the same line, and that's actually what reminded me. But once I made that change, now this is on the same line, and I kind of like that as a change also. So by the way, one thing you can do, now that I've made these adjustments, like if I remove this page break here, and this line break, notice, oh, well, I guess those were on the same, so Never mind. Anyhow, sometimes like a change in MuseScore version might have the effect of like everything is just off a tiny bit, the font has changed, something has changed where a different number of measures fit on a line somewhere, and then these little adjustments that I've made don't make sense anymore. So sometimes what I like to do is if I'm happy with how the things are basically laying out, what I might sometimes do is just lock in all the page breaks. Like this line actually looks a little crowded to me. I wonder if I can get away with moving this to the next line. Probably it's going to have a ripple effect that I'm not going to be happy with. That actually looks better. I got lucky. So yeah, now this doesn't look so crowded here. This looks a little crowded. I wonder what happens if I move this to the next line. I do some of this, but it's easy to get carried away with really trying to fine-tune all your line breaks. And if you got all the time in the world, have a ball. I have a limited patience for it, so I'll just sort of do the bare necessity. But I actually think that worked pretty well. So I kind of want to lock in all these line breaks because now I don't want MuseScore to, after the next update, some change causing this measure to fit on this line. I just want to lock this in now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to make sure nothing's selected first, or actually select everything first. And then I can go Edit, Tools, Add Remove System Breaks. I can use this option here. By the way, break systems every 4 measures. You do that a lot in lead sheets to make them every 4 measures. That's why that's the default. But this one here, Add System Break at the end of each system. Now, that just goes ahead and adds line breaks everywhere to kind of make sure that MuseScore won't try to fit more measures on a line in the future. Now, to make sure that it will fit that many, that it won't fit fewer, I'm going to hit Control A, and I'm going to reduce the stretch. I'm going to go curly brace. Nothing is going to happen visually, but what that did is bought me a little wiggle room. I reduced the stretch so that the measures are a little bit narrower by default, but then they still fill out to the end of the line. But it means now if one of the measures gets wider, they'll still fit. So this trick of adding those line breaks and then reducing stretch is something that I will do on any part where I've really started thinking about where my line breaks are. All right, and anyhow, this is the process. And I've gone through and I'm pretty happy with that's the violin part, the violin 2 part, and that's kind of what I do. So I saw that there have been a few questions and I've answered them as I went along. This process then, when I print this out, this is going to be quite readable. I mean, this is not the actual version of this. This is the version that I worked on last week that I took and I applied a style file to change the fonts. The original version of this I had already gone through and made a lot of these same changes. But now I might print out these parts the next time we perform and have people play these instead. Or since they've already probably written in all their bow markings and stuff, I won't worry about it. But anyhow, these are the kind of things that I like to do to pretty up things. It's just, it's a detail-oriented thing, but this idea where I've laid things out vertically and I can just start scrolling through, I'm using 2-finger scroll on my touchpad to do that. And just looking for collisions and fixing them. And again, click, control arrow does a lot for me. Sometimes if there's like multiple things I want to do at once, you can control click them and then use the inspector. Like if I knew that both of these rehearsal letters were too high and I wanted to lower them, I can control click them and then go down here and lower them by pressing up arrow. Yeah, that actually looked kind of nice. Or another thing you can do, if you know everything on a line, if you know like especially for lyrics, you want to adjust all the lyrics on one line, what you can do is select everything on the line first. So click this measure, shift click that measure, then right click something that you want to change. Like in this case, rehearsal marks. I might right click a rehearsal mark and then say select all similar elements. Oh, not same staff, sorry, oops, I take it back, but it's too late. So select this again. I didn't mean same staff, I meant in range selection. and now it's only selected those two. So it did the same thing as control click. Control click is great if there's only two, but what if there had been like a whole line of lyrics? Then doing the range selection first would help. So yeah, those are some of the things that I like to do. And hopefully that helps some of you in getting your parts to look as good as they can. MuseScore is pretty good with this sort of thing. I found that when I was a Finale user, I spent more time prettying up my parts than I do with MuseScore. I think Sibelius users, because they have this automatic collision avoidance, it's called magnetic layout, they spend less time than MuseScore users do prettying parts up. And the new program Dorico that's out is, that's its real claim to fame, is it does everything really well automatically. But I'm sure there's still some time you have to spend fixing things up manually. This is how you go about it with MuseScore. And I wish you luck in your music. And again, if you have questions, feel free to ask me here, ask me on the forum, ask on the forum. Other people can answer. That's a great way to ask. So signing off. Oh, and the light just turned off again. So yeah, that's good enough. All right, thanks, and I'll see you next week.